Hi everyone and welcome to a very special live edition of Embracing Marketing Mistakes. I'm Chris Norton and today we're marking two big milestones. First, it's our second birthday, and second, this is our very first LinkedIn Live. So whether you're joining us from the major brand, the agency world, or somewhere in between, thank you for being here. We appreciate it. We've got a huge session lined up for you, packed with insight, practical tools, and hopefully no fluff. To help us make sense of it all, we've brought back one of the most popular guests, Stuart Bruce. He's a global expert on PR measurement and someone who's been helping marketers cut through the noise for years, including me, because he's my ex-boss. In the first half of the session, we'll be talking about the Barcelona Principles 4.0. If you've ever struggled to prove the impact of your work or justify the budget, you're going to want to pay close attention to this. Then after a short break, we'll move into something every marketer is talking about right now, which is AI. Yes, AI. We'll be asking Stuart to share the 3 AI tools you need to be using in 2025 if you want to stay ahead and actually improve performance. Like we said, no fluff. Throughout the session, we'll be taking you through questions, so drop them in the comments as we go. And if you know someone who'd benefit from this, tag them and invite them now to join us live too. We're really excited about what lies ahead today, so let's get straight into it and welcome the guys onto the show. Hi everybody, welcome. Well, hopefully it's all working on the hottest day of the year so far. In the studio, I've got my compadre co-host, Will Ockenden. Hello, Will.
Hello.
And our special guest, third time on the pod, friend of the show, ex-boss, so don't say anything too bad, Stuart Bruce. Welcome to the show, Stuart.
Thank you, Chris. If you drop bribes into the comments, I'll tell you some tales about Chris.
Please don't. Okay, so quite an exciting show we've got on today. We're going to have it in 2 parts, and we're going to walk you through a couple of things. So one of the first bits we're going to cover is the Barcelona Principles, which bizarrely was last week reset in Vienna. So is that Vienna 4.0, Stuart? What do we call them?
Yeah, so Barcelona Principles 4.0 rather than Vienna 1.0. Jokes aside, it actually makes sense to keep calling them the Barcelona Principles because it's probably the thing that Amex's best known for. So changing them and nobody would have a clue what you're on about.
Yeah.
I mean, do you know? Sorry, we're diving straight into it.
Yeah.
There's a second part as well, isn't there, where we're gonna look at AI and some of the kind of the must adopt AI technologies, which is the second part. But Barcelona Principles then, and AMEC, there's a lot of kind of jargon there. Taking a step back then, what are the Barcelona Principles or the Vienna Principles? What is AMEC and why should people care?
Okay, let's deal with the what's AMEC first because that's kind of really important. So it stands for, and I'm only going to say this once, the International Association for the Measurement and Evaluation of Communications.
Well done.
Which is kind of quite a mouthful. And it's basically mainly made up of a lot of the big monitoring and measurement companies. That's kind of the base of its membership. But it also has some of the big global PR agencies. It has kind of smaller kind of agencies. It's got individuals, and it's a community of people who are passionate about kind of using planning, measurement, and evaluation, so as we can do better work for, we can actually show that comms works and to make it better.
And it's to demonstrate. The difference is that if there's people out there just measuring lots of different things, paralysis by analysis, there's marketing people out there that are struggling with all sorts of bits and pieces. But the Barcelona Principles were set up to demonstrate like a true business impact, right, from communications and marketing.
Yeah, if we could take the step right back to basics. So 2010, that's when the first Barcelona Principles were launched. And the idea behind them is, I'm going to be the first one to swear here, is that basically PR and comms people are at measurement. And it's kind of because most of us, if you was to say what your favourite subject at school, nobody's going to say maths because everybody hates numbers.
Yeah, everyone's favourite friend is the percentage increase calculator in a PR agency, isn't it?
Absolutely. So nobody likes them. And they pulled together these principles of kind of how to do it. And they've been updated every 5 years since. And the thing is that originally they didn't tell you how to do it, but it did mean if you were like putting a system in place for your client or your company, you could kind of go through and say, okay, does it do this? Does it do that? And once we get into the changes, I can kind of explain some of the things it did. But yeah, it was basically all about making comms more effective.
Okay, and so how has it moved on then? So because we use AMEC and the Barcelona Principles at Prohibition with our clients, what is the first thing when we're onboarding the client? We'll go through, break down what business impact they want, and we'll work back. So it means that from the beginning that we're demonstrating some kind of business impact for our clients. But how has it changed then? What's changed since?
Well, first up, congrats on the fact that you're using it. And I know we didn't work with you on this because there is a hell of a lot of companies out there that don't, and they do stuff in a really kind of mediocre way. So when you're actually doing that impact stuff for clients, it makes a huge difference to the client, the benefit they see from what you do from them.
And board engagement as well is one of the big changes we've seen. Suddenly you're having conversations with the FD, the CEO, and they can actually see the impact and the ROI of every pound they're spending on marketing.
Yeah, and you're talking their language. You're talking about things they care about. I mean, do they really care about clicks or views or reach or all these kind of bizarre metrics that some people talk about? And I think that was actually one of the key, talking about the changes that we're seeing in these Barcelona Principles. One of the there were quite a few, but one of them was often people made the mistake, because we talked a lot about the impact and about the outcome, of thinking we were saying that outputs don't matter and you don't need to measure them. But actually you do. You still want to know how much media coverage you've got. You still do want to know how many people viewed your video. You still do want to know how many people are watching this LinkedIn Live. Those metrics matter. It's just that they're not the most important ones. And I think sometimes, because we emphasised impact and outcome, people thought they didn't. And so we've made it clearer that that's what that they really do.
I should have said, actually, for this being the first LinkedIn Live, firstly, I'm delighted that I'm not the one to swear first. So whoever bet on that, you're wrong. But second thing, if you've got questions for Stuart during the show, fire them over, because I've got a live feed here of the questions. So thanks to everybody that's watching. So if you've got any questions, because Will and I can ask some questions about how we use it. But if you've got questions on, obviously AI is the second part, but if you've got questions on the Barcelona Principles, Vienna Principles, whichever we want to call them, 4.0, just fire them on here and we'll do our best to get them into the show today.
So just kind of talking about the changes again, we've got a graphic here that we can show you, because one of the problems of the old principles is people found it quite hard to kind of relate them all together. So you hopefully should be able to see on screen now a graphic that's kind of color-coded against the 7 principles, and it shows which are the ones where you're kind of aligning your objectives, which are the ones where you're... Sorry, Chris just moved my iPad. So
Chris, you can't do that, Chris.
I'm breaking the fourth wall.
Yeah, so I could no longer talk about what I'm talking about. Yes, you can see, right at the front, Barcelona Principle number 1. It's about setting clear, measurable objectives is a critical prerequisite for effective communication, planning, measurement, and evaluation. To which my response is, no shit, Sherlock, because if you don't know where you're going, how on earth can you know which direction do you want to go?
Well, on that, I think let's briefly talk about setting objectives, because I think it's about being really, really specific, isn't it? And the more specific your objectives, the easier it is to measure against, and the easier to know whether you have or haven't achieved it. I mean, what makes a great objective?
Well, several things is, first of all, you've got to know whether you've achieved it. So, so people talk about kind of SMART objectives, and that's good, but sometimes it's actually quite difficult to come up where you're doing every single bit of that SMART acronym. So I think the most important thing is that you're trying to get them all. You're going to make them specific. You're going to actually make them achievable. You're going to have a time frame on them. And if you can do most of those things, you're not aiming for perfection. You're going to have much, much better objectives than you've had previously.
So a bad objective, for example, would be drive brand awareness.
Yeah.
A good objective would be increase brand awareness by 40% in the UK market within 6 months.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
The irony is the amount of briefs that you see that say drive brand awareness, and that's it, isn't it?
But this is where you can differentiate yourself. If you go back in and talk to a CEO or a marketing director and you kind of giving them a better kind of objective, most of them aren't going to turn around and say, "Oh no, I just want my rubbish one before." If you can kind of explain why you've done it.
It can be a difficult conversation though, can't it? When you end up challenging senior people, they've set an objective, but I suppose the outcome it's a positive outcome if you can have that conversation, isn't it?
Yeah, and you can also start off by agreeing with them. So you don't tell them, raising brand awareness is a rubbish objective. You say, that's a great objective you set there, and what we've done is we've tried to refine it and add to it.
Yeah, I have to be honest. A couple of conversations we've had have been quite awkward. Like you've had a conversation with a client, and they're like, we start asking questions like, well, what's that going to do to the business? Why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? What is this for? And they start to get a little bit defensive. Why are you asking me all these questions? I've just been told this, and I suppose it depends on which buyer you're dealing with, whether it's a financial buyer or the person that's executing the campaigns themselves.
Yeah, and I think you've actually just nailed it there. It's critical who you're speaking to, because also you've got to be realistic about these objectives. The ones that really matter to the company are the ones like sales or recruitment or whatever, but they might not be the same ones as matters to that individual. They might have their own ones, which are to do with their internal profile or promotion in the company. So sometimes you've got to kind of walk that kind of double, kind of both sides of that fence.
So setting great objectives, that's our starting point. Where do we go from there?
Yeah, so that's the kind of Barcelona principle number one. And one of the quite good things about how they've kind of updated them is they've produced an ebook that goes with it that explains all of these things in more detail. And also you can see they've got a bit called it Where We Started, where they actually show what the changes have been kind of over time. So to use this as an example. 2010 it was the importance of goal setting and measurement. It barely tells you anything, whereas now I think one of the key things that's kind of been added to the Barcelona Principle one is that word clear, because very often we make them too hard to understand. And one of the things that we've done is we've worked with Google, and there they use something called OKRs, which stands for Objectives and Key Results. And one of the principles behind writing them is you've got to write them in the way that a layperson would understand. If you've got to explain them, they ain't good.
Which ironically is what PR people are supposed to do, right? Yeah. Write clearly, so your mum could understand your press release, right?
Yeah, but we use jargon all the time. We've been using it in this podcast, in this kind of LinkedIn Live already. Have we got a LinkedIn Live or a podcast or a pod or both?
Well, it's our birthday pod. We didn't mention that either. Look at the
all the key messages have gone out the window.
The key message. We screwed everything up, and Stuart's already sworn.
We'll crack into that cake at the halfway point.
If you ask a question, we'll try and send you a free bit of melted cake all the way across to you guys.
And I mean, there's 7 of these. I probably don't have time to go through all 7 in detail, but if we just kind of look at the next one on here. So I'm going to read them out, because defining and understanding all stakeholder audiences are essential steps to plan, build relationships, and create lasting impact. Okay, so I've got a couple of issues with this one. So overall, I think the improvements to the Barcelona Principles are brilliant. I'm going to be more controversial here, and I can see some AMEC people shaking their heads. I don't necessarily feel this one has kind of captured what it's about, and I've got 2 reasons for that. Is one, what the hell is a stakeholder audience? Because basically what they've done is it explains in the booklet that stakeholder is a word that's often used by academics in communications. Audiences tends to be used by brands. So they've kind of merged them together. The problem with that is they're different things. So I actually think it adds to the confusion rather than simplifying it. It's probably going to be the way we talk about it and the way we use it, so that might be resolvable. The other one I have is they've actually dropped a really important word. So the 2020 version said outcome and impact should be identified for stakeholders, society, and the organisation. Dropping the word society, I think, is a really, really retrograde step. And that's because one of our roles in public relations and communications is an organisation's license to operate. You're not going to sell stuff if people think you're horrible. Yeah, you've got to have kind of permission to operate within kind of society, within the economy.
I nearly inserted a brand's name that operates horribly there, but I held it off because it was alive.
We don't want to be sued.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I just think that's, you can still talk about it. It's just not having that word in there. Yeah. I know especially for some of the really big clients we've worked with, adding it was a big plus, because they were able to kind of understand.
So what's the justification of removing the word society? Because it is, like you say, it does make sense.
Oh, Christopher, you shouldn't have asked me that question.
Watch the questions come in now. Go on. Why?
Well, because I've had kind of one of the great things about going to a summit like AMEC is you could have kind of conversations with people who are responsible for drawing them up.
Okay.
So I do have an idea why it's been kind of withdrawn.
Right.
I'm personally not entirely convinced that's a valid reason.
Okay. Interesting.
And I'll probably leave it at that.
Ominous.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So, anything else on AMEC before we move on that you want to talk about? I mean, well, a question people would be. Sorry, I keep using the term AMEC. Barcelona Principles.
Yeah.
Where can people sort of see this ebook, and where can they find out more about them?
Okay, so if you go to kind of, I'm going to remember the URL now. We can drop it in the comments as well.
Yeah.
If you go to amec.org,
That's AMEC.
AMEC, and then I can't remember the URL.
And then there's
it pops up .com.
Are they updating the free tool then? 'Cause there's a free tool out there and it walks you through the process.
Well, this is the other really good thing. So that's what I was going to beginning to talk about before.
Right.
Is that it's now much easier to actually relate the Barcelona principles, because that color coder we were talking about.
Yeah.
It also maps back to the integrated evaluation framework tool.
The tool,
Yeah.
which is basically a free tool that walks you through the process so you can do it yourself.
And that starts at the business impact stage, doesn't it? So it forces you to think, okay, what do we want to do as a business? What are
we
business
trying
objectives?
to achieve here?
Yeah.
You know, and then you kind of takes, from that it gives you the opportunity to think about, okay, so how do we need to communicate in order to achieve that business thing?
Yeah.
What activities are we going to do? How are we going to know if that activity works?
Yeah.
And I think that's the other one of the key changes that they've made in these principles is, and you can see that from the graphic that we had on screen before, where there was a grey circle running around the outside, and that's because this is about learning and iteration. Too often we treat this as a campaign. It's a kind of one-off. So we set the objectives at the front, then at the end we kind of measure it and see whether it's worked. Well, actually, what are we doing to kind of learn from it? Can we learn during it? Can we actually course correct? By checking some real-time metrics. And if we've started to do something, there's nothing wrong with this is embracing marketing mistakes. There's nothing wrong with admitting we've made a mistake.
Yeah, exactly.
And actually changing track.
Yeah.
But you've got to be all over your numbers in order to do that.
I mean, that's been a big, I think 18 months ago, 2 years ago, we've started rolling out this framework as part of our planning. And I think there's 3 areas it's really paid dividends. One is that kind of continual improvement. One is kind of ruthlessly focusing your tactics and your execution on what those objectives are, what those business objectives are. And I think that's been really refreshing. If there's an activity that's a nice to have, it looks cool, but it actually doesn't have any impact whatsoever. Why on earth are you doing it?
The bit that was interesting to me for working in what we do is the difference between business objectives. Because when you're talking about objectives, setting objectives, great objectives, comms objectives are what we usually get. And it's the bit when it gets awkward is when you're going, I know you want to do this objective in comms, but what does that mean? And why are we doing it? And then they go, sometimes they go, I don't really know why we're doing it.
Because those comms objectives feed into the business objectives, don't they?
Yeah.
If you get it right.
So often, I mean, I love the word when you use the word ruthless. Because so often people are just doing the wrong stuff, and people say, I don't have time to do all this and planning, and it's kind of, yeah, you do, because actually you're wasting so much time at the moment doing activities that are pointless.
Yeah, that don't move the dial at all.
So you actually judge a lot of awards, right?
Yeah.
So you'll go through and looking at people's objectives and looking at how agencies and brands in-house present themselves. What are the biggest mistakes you find in?
Okay.
Have you seen some absolute humdingers? You don't have to name them.
So, 2 common mistakes is one. It's quite easy to spot the awards where they've retrofitted the objectives to the results. And when I'm judging, that's what I do. I will not read the full entry to begin with. I'll read the objectives, I'll read the results, and that's my short list. I will scan the rest, but that's how I get my short list.
Okay.
Yeah, because the creativity element and stuff and how amazing it was, unless it's worked, it don't really matter. So usually it's going to be the most creative campaign out of those that have worked really well that I'll score highly.
I suppose it doesn't really matter, does it? If these are your objectives and these are the results.
Yeah.
I mean, it does matter and it doesn't matter.
Well, so this week we're sitting on sort of beside the canal in sunny Leeds, and lots of our kind of colleagues sitting on the Croisette in Cannes, kind of shipping kind of warm rosé and kind of celebrating kind of the Cannes Lion Awards.
Shout out to the Cannes posse. Yeah, they're having a great time.
Next year we'll do this from Cannes, I think.
Yeah, are you paying for that budget?
That would be cool and expensive.
Yeah, we'll fly you over.
But the thing is, people forget about Cannes is it's the Cannes Lion Festival of Creativity. The campaigns that win are the most creative campaigns.
Yeah.
Which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But there's not the best campaigns. The best campaigns are the ones that work, which don't necessarily always require massive creativity.
Well, that's good. I've got a couple of things. So first of all, we want to thank Mr. Tim Bailey. Thanks, Tim. For dripping the AMEC link in the chat. So he's already shared it. If you want to find it, we don't have to remember it off the top of our heads. Dripping. It says dripping. That's a typo from our Jamie off the Joe Rogan podcast. And also we've got an AMEC topic suggestion, which is from someone in the crowd. Basically, it's on over measurement. Is there a risk of over measurement with AI reportedly taking over? With AI reporting taking over, sorry.
Okay, so that's kind of two separate things. So the over measuring, God, 100%. And one of the things I always talk about is less is more. Yeah, and that's actually what the framework helps you to do, and the principles help you to do. It helps you to drill down to the metrics that matter. Yeah, because there's like hundreds of things we could measure.
Drowning in data. I mean, I remember when social media first emerged, and some of the monthly reports you'd see, there'd be 500 different metrics, none of which tell you anything.
No, absolutely. And this is where, when you said about the incremental improvement before, it's about understanding what the different numbers are for. So some of these, like 101 numbers, for that incremental improvement for the team to use, they can be brilliant. They can really help you see on a day-to-day basis what you need to do to get better. But why the hell would you report them? They're just not relevant to anybody. The ones you should be reporting are the ones that matter. And that might actually be quite a small list. Has it changed behaviour? Has it changed what people think? Has it done what it kind of says on the tin?
We'll move on to the AI section in a moment. I think taking a big step back, do you want to give us sort of 3 key reasons or 3 key benefits of doing this? People will be listening to this thinking, I do need to measure better. But what are the tangible benefits of it? Is it improved impact of campaigns? Is it more budget?
I think it might be. I want to half answer this. Is it half of it is actually going to save yourself some time and wasted effort? Because if you measure all those things you just talk about, over measurement with that question we've just had, like measuring just a few things actually means you can focus down and you don't, wasting all that time just measuring everything.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of answered your own kind of questions, but so I would actually just give one. It's you make yourself matter. One of the kind of speakers there, he was kind of talking about kind of what you can do to make a CCO important and kind of essential to a company. And actually, if you're talking this, doing all of this, following the Barcelona Principles, using the framework, means you can talk to the CEO in their language. Yeah. You make yourself count, you make yourself matter. So all the other things that we talked about, you kind of the more time, the more budget, being taken more seriously, so you have an input into decisions earlier. All of that kind of flows from it.
Yeah.
The only other time you get that is when we're rolled in for a bit of crisis management, and then everybody listens to you, isn't it? That's the only time we seem to get that sort of FaceTime with the CEO and the CFO.
So could this start to raise the profile of PR and comms in an organisation? Because that's, during COVID, comms kind of had a massive uplift, didn't it, in terms of suddenly it is really visible in an organisation. Perhaps that dropped down a little bit. I mean, that's something we all need to. We all need to
and you're removing. You're getting away from this idea that it's a fluffy profession.
Yeah.
It's just about publicity. It's just about kind of the stuff on the edges, and you're actually showing in kind of hard numbers that it's critical, that it's essential.
So, are we moving into the AI section then?
That's a good. When do we eat the cake, by the way?
When do we eat the cake? We're not doing that live on air.
Right.
Nobody wants to see that. You don't want to have your
5 minute.
You don't have your bacon sandwich moment, do you?
Chris could have some.
You're the one wearing a white t-shirt.
Yeah.
You're the one most at risk.
He's going to try and stick it in my face, isn't he? Live on, maybe at the end.
Yeah.
No.
Right. Let's move on.
So AI. Right. Okay. So the world's most talked about subject. I think everybody here, everybody listening, will have done AI in some vein or form, that have tested something out. But what I've really noticed, like we've got an AI committee here at Prohibition. You helped a couple of years ago. We had a discussion with you about various bits of AI and looking at workflows and things. That is a constant process, looking at your workflows. How can you automate different bits and pieces of what you're doing? But I was just saying, I've had a committee meeting this morning with the AI guys, and the last month or two has been mental in terms of like things that have come out that have really changed the game on AI, like the reasoning models, the connectors where you can connect. So right now you can connect your ChatGPT to your Teams, to your email, to your calendar, to your Google Drive, to your HubSpot, to your. It is insane. And then there's a lot of questions to be asked about privacy and things like that. So what are the three things that people should be doing today on AI? What's useful for marketers, would you say, Stuart?
The three things that people should be doing.
Tools,
Just to put you on the spot.
Putting me on the spot, because that was actually the different question to the one we pre-prepared.
Oh, well, there you go. I'll throw the script out the window then.
Not that matters.
Or even if you're not talking specific tools, the categories, the broad categories people need to be focusing their time.
And I think that's the key thing. I think often people get, and Chris began to kind of talk about it then, people get they start AI from the wrong angle. They look at some of the bright, shiny stuff. And actually, the first things you probably want to be thinking about is how can we just integrate it into the day-to-day? Literally this morning, I was kind of sitting there reading an article about the fact that there's a complaint against Microsoft because of some of the advertising it's using for Copilot. And some of it was rejected and some of it hasn't been. But one of the issues they were talking about is how you can kind of demonstrate the ROI of it and how effective it is. And the reality is, if you're putting something like Copilot into a team, it's going to save 2 to 4 hours a week for everybody in the team. The UK government just did a really big pilot, and they were showing that it's like 26 minutes a day.
Savings, individual to each person.
Yeah, to each time saving
immediately
for each person.
Staggering cost savings, isn't it?
Yeah, no, exactly. So we've got you kind of talking about the calculator.
Yeah, but it's not cheap. Just to be clear, it's not cheap, Copilot. You have to pay a whole year, don't you?
No, you don't. You did when it first launched, but now you've still got to take a year's contract, but you pay monthly the same as you do for the rest of Microsoft 365.
So it is quite a financial outlay.
It is, but we've got a kind of calculator that we use with clients where we can actually look at what the savings are.
Based on the time savings, average salaries.
Exactly.
So, right.
So we use the Reuben Sinclair kind of average salary survey. So we know what an AD, an AM, etc. kind of earns an average. So for a 20-person agency, the savings will be 54k a year. If it's on the 2 hours, or kind of 108 if it's on the 4 hours. But that's after you've taken into account all of the licensing costs for us working with you.
Your net saving.
Okay.
Yeah, to do the training and to kind of get people up in the thing.
And is it so? I suppose is Copilot the one you're recommending? Because I find it to be ChatGPT light. So because it's got 8 models, it's like, which bloody model do I use? Reasoning, 3, 4, 4.5.
And I think this is one of the things that's going to disappear. Yeah, the fact that it is too confusing at the moment, and that's why. So when you say would we recommend Copilot, usually we're going to be recommending 2 things. There's going to be a team-wide solution that everybody's using, and that's where you get your 2 to 4 hours from.
Okay.
And crudely, it's usually quite obvious which it's going to be. If you're a Microsoft house, you use Copilot. If you're a Google house, you use Gemini. It is that simple, because that's for kind of the general day-to-day productivity. We'll also look at and analyze kind of what people do on a day-to-day basis, what their tasks are, what their workflows are, what pressures they get from clients. Because surprisingly, even amongst agencies or in-house teams, it does actually vary quite a lot in terms of where they spend the time, what they find difficult, etc. So you can then figure out, these are the 50 things where you should be using AI, and you train everybody to use them. After that, you're also going to be able to identify specialist AI tools where you might say, well, actually, as well as kind of Copilot or Gemini, you need to use X, Y, Z, but only in these circumstances.
Okay.
So for example, for some people, we might have some ChatGPT team accounts that they can use, but most of the time they're going to be using Copilot or Gemini. And you sort of mentioned privacy and security when you're talking about connectors.
Yeah.
That.
I mean, so we've got Pro, and we've got a team situation set up, and I've set the privacy. So it asks you, do you want to share? Do you want to share your searches with OpenAI so we can improve the model? No, I don't. No, I do not want you looking. But then you still don't really know if you're turning it off. if it's turned off. Do you think?
No, I think you do. These are big global software corporations. So when you're kind of signing up to your T's and C's, those are the T's and C's you've signed up to. I think the key thing about, say, a Microsoft one is you've already signed up to the T's and C's. Yeah, so you're all, the security levels you've got by using Copilot are exactly the same ones you've been using for years on SharePoint. The problem arises is if for companies that haven't set up SharePoint properly. Because
the irony of Stuart sharing this is that he just tried to share me a document before this, and he's had all his IT security marketing mistake. He's had all his security improved so much so that Stuart couldn't share the document. Is that fair?
Yep, that's absolutely true.
So it's stopping you from sharing.
Just print it out.
Yeah,
go analog.
Or as we did, we had to encrypt the phone so you could actually read it on my phone.
Yeah.
But so often people don't set things up properly. And, the risk of that in the olden days of people accidentally stumbling across the wrong file on SharePoint was rare. With Copilot, actually, it becomes a lot higher if you haven't set it up properly. And, once you've cracked that, it becomes really secure and really private. And you can cover all these things off. Often when we go in and you see teams experimenting, the risk of kind of using free tools, even if they know they're not much but private information in, people get very confused as to what that actually means. So you get some in the team that are far too conservative with a small c, and they don't put things in that are totally safe, whereas others will be putting stuff in that they really shouldn't. And neither are doing it on purpose. It's just a really hard line to define.
What about the big agencies then? So when we were talking last time I saw you, that they've been building their own designated AI engines built on the large language models. And I remember you saying that you felt like they'd gone in early, but they'd gone in so early that they're now out of date, half of them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be... Well, they're doing different things. So I think the massive investments that people like Publicis and WPP have made, because we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars that they're investing in these things. And whether or not you need to is a good question.
It's like building a social network from scratch when social media emerged, isn't it? Actually, do you need to do that?
Probably one of the best examples I've got of this, because we've got kind of first-hand knowledge of it, is the UK Government Communications Service is probably, if you wanted a really advanced example of AI being used for comms, it's that. 7,000 people working in communications in government, 3,500 of them, at the last published figures, are now using a tool called GCS Assist, which is a kind of AI kind of tool they've built in-house. It can do about 50 different kind of communications tasks. It really, really is good. And about 2 months ago, they open sourced it. So you could actually go and have a look at some of the code that they used to build it. But the thing about that is, before we knew they were going to open source it, we'd actually built most of it within Copilot, using Copilot Studio, because we looked at what it could do. And because you can kind of create custom agents and connectors and all this type of stuff, we'd replicated a lot of its ability. Now, when they started building it, that wasn't an option for them. But I think that's an example of how quick things are moving. You can actually build such sophisticated stuff within Google or Microsoft, that for most use cases, do you really need to do that sort of investment? But they're also doing some of the big agencies are doing a different type of investment. So for example, Burson have just launched a kind of reputation measurement tool using AI. And that's a use case where actually you can see that's a real differentiator. It gives them a competitive edge. Now, there's also third-party companies out there that are building this type of stuff. So if you're a smaller agency, you can still access something. But I think, I've not had a detailed look at what Burson have done yet, but from what I've kind of seen and heard from talking to people, it looks good.
So, you're having these conversations all the time. The in-house teams, marketing departments, agencies you're speaking to. Let's ignore kind of bespoke solutions. What are can you give us some examples of some of the more kind of creative executions around how those agencies or teams are using existing tools? I think that.
Yeah. So, let's take agencies kind of first, because one of the examples where both with our own clients and we know from other examples they're seeing a big impact is in new business and pitches. So for example, there's this whole thing about kind of transparency, about using AI images and the ethics behind it, et cetera, et cetera. But one place where you can use them, and we know it's effective because we've seen it, is in a new business pitch. And whether that's to a kind of pitching an idea to an existing client or pitching a kind of new client, you can use AI to mock up the idea and to actually tell, kind of bring your words, your idea to life really, really quickly.
And they look better than they used to look, where, because like I just talked about, it's developed so much quicker. I know that the images are looking better. Is that which model would you use to do that?
I think saying about which model, part of it is learning how to use the model, and that keeps changing. So for example, literally just the latest announcement is that Midjourney have had, because that used to be kind of the go-to tool for images, but they've just added video on now. How good it is or bad it is, I have not a clue.
So it's
they've
about
just
the quality of your prompts, basically.
It's the training, the quality of the prompts.
Because I keep thinking of that Gordon Ramsay
no,
video. He looks like melted wax, doesn't it?
It's moved on a million miles since then. I mean, I know that Disney and Universal were suing somebody. Was it Midjourney this earlier this week? There's a law case, and basically, like they've opened up a. It's basically saying that Disney are saying that they've trained the model on Star Wars and all Disney's films, because there's been various blogs popping up with all the graphics that are all made in AI based on Star Wars IP. So it's like
that requires some specialist legal counsel, doesn't it? I mean, that's such a niche.
Yeah,
who's going to win with that amount of money?
Well, I think that what we're seeing these cases happening all over. You got the New York Times,
Getty Images, as well.
Getty Images, yeah. Ultimately, it's going to need kind of a refreshed copyright law. And the thing is, copyright laws in different countries. There's a consultation paper out in the UK at the moment as to what ours should look like. And basically, the UK government stance is basically to be pro-consumer and pro-business. And what that's actually meant is they've hacked off the publishers that own the copyright, and they've hacked off the big tech companies, because neither are kind of happy. To me, that means I think they're probably getting it kind of right. If one side was clapping, they'd have got the balance wrong. But, just on the other stuff that's happening on AI, I think probably one of the biggest opportunities for PR at the moment, and the biggest opportunities for and the way that brands need to be refocusing what they're investing in is, and it's got various names. So one of them is called GEO, which is basically generative AI optimization. That was a really big topic in Vienna. It's something that we've been doing absolutely loads of work on. I think it could be a huge kind of revenue stream for PR agencies. I think it could make a real difference to how brands benefit from marketing. And basically what we're talking about is how can you influence AI, the answers that AI gives you.
Oh my God, I was just talking to... So we interviewed Andrew Bruce Smith on Wednesday, and I was talking about the fact that Google got caught with its pants down, launched its... ChatGPT came from nowhere. Gemini quickly came out and got evolved, and because they've realised the game is over. SEO, like people aren't going. The highest downloaded product is ChatGPT. The most searched platforms are the AI tools now, aren't they? Not Google.
So as brands, how can we influence that? What do you know about the algorithms?
So first up is, I've got a whole kind of presentation about this, and it starts off with an AI-generated video of a snake oil salesman. And that's because anybody that's telling you they know how to do it is lying through their teeth, because they don't. Not even kind of the big LLM companies know exactly how their models kind of output an answer. Yeah, that's the whole point. Now, what we can do, one of the things we've been doing is studying the studies, because lots of people have done research. So we've been doing some kind of secondary research of looking at all these different reports, trying to identify kind of common themes and trends, because we know if lots of people have found the same results, those are probably the ones to go for, because some of them contradict each other. Which is the reason we've been doing it. But the big thing, and the kind of good news for people like us, is the top driver of AI answers is earned media. So traditional media sources is back in. Again.
Which is about trust and authority.
Yeah. So, but interesting, it's not necessarily the media titles you might have historically targeted. When we're doing our kind of top tier media, we tend to focus on prestige ones
So can I get a piece of coverage in Rubber and Plastics Weekly, and then that'll help my My SEO for AI.
Chris is joking, but the answer is actually yes.
Oh my god!
So trade media is actually far more
Really?
important than it used to be. We think.
Interesting.
Yeah. Caveat all these statements I'm saying with the word "we think."
I think I'd be interested in that report. If you've got a report on, because it sounds like a bit of a game changer. If you can find a way to optimize your business so you rank better on AI.
Yeah.
But then all the models are different, though.
No, they are, and that's why a lot of this. Sometimes when studies come out, they'll only have studied one model.
So why trade publications then? I mean, is there a rationale for that?
I think because it's not just them on their own. Yeah, so there's a whole host of other things. So earned media sits there probably at the top of the tree.
Yeah.
But then it's also owned media. Owned media matters as well.
Wow.
And I think one of the things that the models are doing is they're cross-checking between these different sources, and then if it's seeing something in earned media, and then on the company's website or the brand's website, it's got the same thing. That's affirmation.
I wonder if it's like just what it's done is actually removed the gamification of SEO. Like it's not links now.
But then gamification of AI.
Yeah. This is what we're that's the snake oil salesman is the gamification of AI.
Yeah.
And the difference is there are probably a lot more variables that we don't know about. So some of the others are structured data.
You might be able to hear an ice cream van in the background.
Well, get outside.
The joys of a live broadcast.
I'd like some ice cream.
What do you guys want?
I was just about to send Chris out to get us all one. But yeah, so what else is structured data they like? So some of the, we are all kind of probably of an age where you can remember kind of the early days of social media and listicles.
Yeah.
Hey, they're making a comeback because AI likes them.
Interesting.
And yeah, so there's all kind of risk about these dozen factors and, of things that we know is going to help to influence AI. And I think so one of the things we're doing is we're working with kind of brands to put together a plan as to kind of these are the things you need to be doing. When you're briefing your agencies, make sure that's part of the brief that they're going to be able to do these things for you. And I think any agency that's actually going in with a realistic offer of what they can do, so i.e. not overclaiming it, but talking about how important it is, and that these are some of the things we are going to consider when we're working for you. I think it gives them a real competitive edge. And if brands are looking for agencies, they want to be looking for ones that can do that.
I've got a question that's popped in.
Oh, excellent.
A topic suggestion. So we've got AI video creation and how brands can use it while still being authentic. AI video creation. Well, the Google Vio that launched a few weeks ago. My God, the quality of those AI videos that you can't tell.
Was that the bee?
Yeah.
From the perspective of the bee, it's astonishing.
Yeah, we'll share the bee video. There's a number. I shared it on my Twitter the other day. Sorry, X. There's a few quite interesting videos, and now there's like spoof videos that look like news reports. Have you seen these? Where they say aliens have landed. And it looks like a genuine, real, but then he goes, "Actually, I'm not here. This is AI," and it's quite scary.
Well, it is, and I would actually flip that question on its head. Yeah, so it's not just about kind of how brands can use it, because potentially there are limited opportunities. One of the other things I was going to talk about when you asked me about kind of the three things you need to be thinking about are misinformation and disinformation. The threat that brands now face because of this is absolutely huge, of kind of the fake narratives it's not just going to be a fake story, it's going to be a fake video, it's going to be your kind of CEO saying there's something they've never said. The risks out there are kind of unbelievably kind of huge.
Shout out to BBC Verify. They've got a right task on their hands now, haven't they?
Doesn't that give people, rogue CEOs, plausible deniability if they did say something terrible?
Yeah, well, no.
Oh, it was just AI.
We saw that with Trump.
Yeah.
So
we saw that with that referee as well. Do you remember the referee that said, that was allegedly, said something about Jurgen Klopp that was disparaging, and then was also allegedly caught taking something at a party, and it was all caught on camera.
And he blamed it on...
And he said that the video was AI generated, and then it turned out it wasn't.
Yeah, and no, that people have already used that as an excuse. But from a kind of brand's perspective, there are tools out there that can help you with this. There's companies like Cyabra, Osavol, who've got kind of, they're basically using really sophisticated AI tools to do things like to detect these threats early, to give you a chance to kind of do something about it. to assess the kind of the areas where you're most likely to be under threat. So there's lots that and once again, for PR firms, it's an opportunity because because it's one of the best ways to protect yourself against this type of threat is preempting it. Doing stuff. It's quite hard to defend yourself once it's happened.
Yeah, being
doing
reactive
stuff before,
is no longer enough, is it? And actually, if you look in our podcast archive, we've done a couple of previous episodes on misinformation, haven't we? Tackling all of these issues.
Yeah, we asked Aunt Cousins about misinformation. It's an interesting. I mean, look at what's happened to M&S and Co-op recently with the hacking, and obviously their PR teams and their IT teams. That must be an absolute nightmare. But what I mean is, people could then you could hack someone and then create a misinformation campaign combined, which is just crazy.
Yeah, no, the whole kind of that kind of vulnerability landscape has never been scarier. And mentioning kind of Aunt Cousins, if you're actually looking for companies to watch at the moment, I would have some serious eyes on Meltwater.
Why is that?
Because Aunt Cousins has just joined them as the head of AI.
Shout out to Aunt back on the pod, please.
Yeah. And at the moment, all of the big vendors kind of say they're doing stuff with AI. There's none, obviously, that kind of say, oh, no, we're not doing anything here. I think in terms of those that really understand it, are doing the proper investment, are doing the proper innovation, that's a lot more fragmented. And it's not necessarily their fault because they've got huge legacy systems they've got to change, blah, blah, blah. They've got clients where they've got specifications they've got to meet now, so they don't necessarily want to meet new ones. But I would certainly be interested in having a kind of conversation with Andy about kind of where, kind of he sees this going.
We've got another question in. So a question from Isabel. Thank you. How can PR professionals maintain authenticity in a world increasingly filled with synthetic media?
Well, we are sitting here around the table.
Or are we? This is AI.
Yeah.
Is it really a table?
Absolutely.
Is that really a cake?
But this could be a kind of AI generated video. But actually, I think one of the things we're going to see a resurgence of is the value of face-to-face.
Yeah.
When I went to kind of Vienna last week, the real value wasn't in hearing loads of amazing presentations from some amazing people. It was actually chatting to them afterwards. It was chatting a bit, over the coffee breaks.
Connections.
Yeah, in the bar at night. Just use one example. We're doing... it's just great how you guys are kind of embracing video. One of the kind of standout presentations last week was Nicole Moreo from LinkedIn. She's like head of insights in North America. And she was kind of talking about how kind of powerful video is. And the fact that, I think it was 6 in 10 respondents said it helped them to the video helped them to inform buying decisions.
So if you're out there thinking about hiring a PR agency, we do know one available.
Well done, guys. Good work.
Great video team.
See, they queued that one up well, didn't they?
They're bigging themselves up there now.
But the other thing was, she also talked about something to do that she called about kind of memories. And that's the kind of the key thing about video. It sticks in your memory. Yeah, right. You will remember it. You might not remember all the details, but it might trigger an emotion. And when people are making buy-in decisions, they always start off with this kind of short initial consideration list. Doesn't matter what model you use. And then they'll do their research and they'll go and expand it, etc., etc. And then they'll kind of start, after they've expanded it, they'll start reducing it again. Usually, that kind of research bit's a waste of time because it's somebody off that initial consideration list that gets the work, that gets appointed, is what they buy. And video is one of the best ways of getting on to that initial consideration list because it triggers that memory.
Memory and the trust, I would think. Digital trust or not?
I think trust is part of it, but I think it's more about that emotional connection. Because, we've just kind of covered how trust can be, how do we know whether the AI video is real? But I think that resurgence of, two things, kind of that face-to-face interaction.
Yeah.
And that kind of audio-visual content.
Hopefully we've answered Isabel's question there.
Yeah, I think so.
She's given us a thumbs up. She says, yes, we have. Thanks, Isabel.
That's a relief.
So, I mean, when I had this committee chat this morning, like on AI, I just said the last 2 months have just blown my mind on AI. I think if you've used it, just revisit it because it is just the reasoning models are incredible. It's like having a barrister in your pocket. It's like having an accountant in your pocket.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
I think that key phrase you just used there, if you haven't used it recently, there are so many people that we talk to where they have dabbled with AI, but and they're not overly impressed. And usually for two reasons: is one, they dabbled too long ago, so it wasn't as good as it is now, and secondly, they were rubbish.
Yeah.
they were like asking dumb questions with dumb prompts.
Yeah.
If you kind of recognize the advances and you actually use it properly. I mean, like that kind of, whatever you call it, whether it's deep research, they've all got the different names for it. That's phenomenal.
Oh,
You can, if you want to like prepare for a media interview or something, you do deep research on a journalist. That's phenomenal. Why would you need your media database?
yeah. I mean, deep research is on all of them, isn't it? But
Yeah.
you can basically, if you haven't used it, you can basically come up with your dissertation that you did at university. I spent 8 months writing mine and read about 18 books on PR and marketing. What a dream that was. It was all about corporate identity. Now you can do that in a sentence. You can say, do me a research on this, and this, compare this with this, and it will take about 30 minutes but it will use multiple sources, and you can follow it through its process, and at the end of it, it will spit out a report that is like fully sourced and is PhD level.
And those citations, well, I'm not sure at the PhD level, but it's very good.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's supposed to be PhD level, arguably.
And I think the citations are really important because it gets over that kind of hallucination element. But it's also an example of how kind of all of these products have feature creep. So it's a bit of a pointless argument about which is best, because I think it was last week or maybe the week before that Microsoft added research and analyst to Copilot.
Okay.
So you can now do the deep research within your secure Copilot environment. Which you couldn't before. So one of the arguments, we had with some clients is, you will use a paid ChatGPT account because you get deep research. You don't need to. It's now in part of it.
But one of the concerns I've got is if you're a business, like if the marketing team's listening to this, right, you've got 20 people in marketing, they get Copilot and they go, like a lot of people, they just get the free one, or Copilot you have to pay for. I've got that as well. You install it, you use it, you watch a few videos on the key things, but actually it's rolling it out and staying on top of it.
So we have got something we call the AI adoption illusion, which is what you just described. People
It was all an illusion.
No, people are under the illusion that if you get some AI tools, it's going to make a radical difference to your business. It ain't. It's going to do diddly squat. And
we can clip that bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's your soundbite.
We've got 15 minutes left, by the way.
It is.
It's actually 9 minutes left, I believe.
But yeah, I mean, I think I mentioned that Australian government one where they saved 14 minutes a week. But that's because they didn't do any training and they didn't have a proper plan. What the heck did they expect?
Getting the tools is not enough. You need to proactively use them.
And how do you stay on top of the training, though? Because there's new stuff. Literally, in the week, so many things come out, don't they?
Yeah, well, some of it is how you structure how you're working. So it's like how do you stay on top of the training for anything else in the firm? I was quite amused by you've got an AI committee. That's extremely. That's just a lovely, quaint word, committee. Most people we've spoken to have got working groups.
Well, it's a steering. It's a
right. We'll change that.
It's a work steering group.
Yeah.
What's a more sophisticated?
I'm going to get
steering group?
a more complicated jargon word to make me sound clever. It basically is a group of people to be evangelists on AI on different tools, whether that's Claude, Gemini, ChatGPT, and Copilot.
Yeah,
because it's basically we're in the Betamax or VHS, CD or vinyl stage, aren't we?
Yeah.
Which one?
Well, no, I'm not sure we are actually, because I'd go back to that thing about what's your Office suite. That's going to be the core product that everybody in the company is going to use. Then you enhance it with the other ones.
Okay. So everyone roll out Copilot if you're Microsoft.
Because no one wants to roll out minidisc, do they?
Yeah.
I love minidisc.
I know,
My
it's great.
DJ sets.
And people have this argument, but it's not the best. Of course it's not. I would never, ever claim it is. But if you want kind of that productivity return across the team that's the other thing about kind of your committee is...
I feel shamed here. Is this my marketing mistake?
Well, quite
Do we
possibly.
call it a council? Is that even more old school? The AI council.
Isabel, you need to rebrand it. Come up with a name. We'll run it through ChatGPT and come up with a cooler name.
But one of the key things to making, whatever you want to call it, work is you need two types of people on it. You need kind of the AI evangelists and early adopters, but you also need the laggards and the refuseniks. You need, because that's the way.
Is that the Gartner hype cycle?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want
the extreme ends of it.
Yeah, you want both people, because actually where you're going to get the biggest impact on the company is if everybody's using it a certain amount.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, and that you've got to be careful, and that's why you need a really good AI policy in place, and it wants to be one that kind of makes it safe and reduces all the risk and encourages people to use it. But then you also need an element that allows innovation. So if you do have people that want to experiment and stuff, provide a mechanism. You know.
I've got questions. So, like, let's say we rolled out Copilot to the entire agency, right? So 28 people all get it. And let's say you had a secure server within your server. Would it interrogate that, or would your security levels stop you looking at different things?
So when you'd roll out Copilot to everybody in the thing, it would they basically have access to what they already have access to.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if there's certain folders and teams, channels and stuff, then that's what Copilot would be looking at.
Yeah, because you wouldn't want to give all your personalized data to a business out in San Francisco, would you?
Sorry, you lost me.
Well, like Microsoft, for instance, you don't want them to have access to all your.
But they've already got access, Chris.
That's true.
Yeah, if you're storing stuff in the cloud, that's why the security bit's the same.
Yeah, yeah, fair point.
The concern is that you accidentally, because your folders and your team structures and stuff, the permissions aren't set up properly, you give access to the wrong people in the team. So people, you accidentally let everybody go and have a browse of salaries or something like that.
But then how would that information ever manifest itself? So let's say, a client briefs you on a highly confidential acquisition. You put that into your AI tool. Arguably, could that then show up if somebody did a search saying what company is X likely to be acquired by? AI could then potentially give a response based on the information you've shared with it.
So not AI as a whole. If you were using it in, say, your secure environment, and you can see there's like a little shield when you're using kind of Copilot, so you know that your kind of security's on. The only people that be able to access that highly confidential information are the people that you've given permission to do so within your company.
Yeah.
Hence the reason you need to have got your SharePoint set up properly.
Yeah.
It depends how, maybe not every account team needs access to every bit of it.
I tell you, we've got like another 4 minutes, but I tell you what is interesting: the fact that ChatGPT, OpenAI owned, is you're able to connect it to your Microsoft and Google stuff. So Google, who are selling a completely different products, are allowing Microsoft or OpenAI to connect to their. That to me blows my mind. It's like they're all competing against each other.
Yeah,
it's a weird landscape.
I think so. When I said you choose between a Google environment or a Microsoft environment, I think what OpenAI are doing now with ChatGPT and connectors is really interesting because potentially it means that's not true. Other than you're still always going to have that element of complexity that you're adding by doing it through a third party. And I think because it's so new, I think it's too early to say whether that element of complexity and cost that you're adding is worth it.
I think that's fun. A good discussion because there's literally so much going on. I mean, we could cover it monthly. There's that much going on in this area. It's not something to be ignored anymore. For me, I think everybody needs to be reviewing it regularly and updating everything. I've got 5 suggestions for a new name for our committee. It might not even be called a committee. That's probably my fault. Some of these are awful, I've got to be honest. I think they've come straight from ChatGPT. Innovation and forward-looking with a little rocket at the beginning.
I like the rocket. Yeah.
You like the rocket? AI Futures Forum.
That's quite nice.
Really?
Yeah, a bit of
I think we can come up. I think as a creative bunch of people, we can come up with a few better than this. But thank you for sharing. So, if anyone wants to get hold of you, Stuart, how can they get hold of you?
Oh, I'm on just about any platform you care to mention. If you kind of look for Stuart Bruce, or if you go to kind of the company website, purposefulrelations.com.
And if we ask AI for a recommendation into a leading comms AI consultant, will it recommend you?
It sometimes does, and it sometimes doesn't.
No pressure.
Yeah, I think that's it. If you don't subscribe to the show, please subscribe to the show because we're available on all podcast platforms. So Embracing Marketing Mistakes, just go to our website. You can subscribe on all the podcast platforms. We'd love you to take a listen. We've done tons of stuff in lots of different areas on the show. We haven't talked about many mistakes today, mainly just me screwing things up. But that's what we usually talk about. But I just want to say thank you to Stuart for joining us and for Will. And thank you to you guys for joining us too.